Boom! What's going on, everyone? It's Rahman Mustafa.
It's Emmanuel.
And it's the Ends to Excellence podcast. Thank you for joining us. Today we have a special guest with us. We have Sherene Olusesi. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
Welcome. For all those that don't know, Sherene is a qualified cognitive behavioural psychotherapist.
Hi.
Yep.
And a qualified psychological wellbeing practitioner.
Since when?
Wow. Sherene specializes in student mental health and has an extensive experience carrying out assessments with and CBT treatment to students and staff in higher education, right? Yeah. Okay, she currently works part-time in Efficacy and part-time in the University of Arts in London. Mm-hmm. Great, welcome to the podcast, Sherene.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks
Yes.
me.
So one of the first questions we ask all of our guests is, what ends are you from?
I'm from Catford.
You saying with your chest?
I'm saying it with my chest.
Okay.
Catford.
Grimy Catford, you know.
Southeast.
It's not grime.
It's a bit grimy still.
Wow. And
We'll come back to that.
yeah, we will. And
But it's south there, so.
it is south. We have to rep. And what industry are you excelling in right now?
I'm currently excelling in healthcare services,
Got you. Okay.
specifically mental health.
Okay. Cool. Which is it's an important topic right now. A lot of
Yeah.
people talking about
It
mental health and
is.
stuff like that. So
There's a lot going
we're
on.
glad to have you on the podcast once again.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. So how did you get into this industry?
That is a good question.
What's
So
your
what do I know
journey?
from the bottom to the
Let's
top?
do it. We got time.
So how did I start? So I did a psychology degree at the University of Kent.
So wait. So did you, what A-levels did you study? What did you?
It's a bit touchy still. A levels wasn't a great situation. So
No?
I did,
Yo.
the same struggles as everyone. So I did psychology at A level, media, IT, and law, but we won't talk about the law.
So why? What was wrong with A-levels? Like,
A levels there was a lot of distractions.
yeah?
At A levels, yes. A levels were just hard, to be honest. I think A levels were like harder than a degree.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone
I think the
else
jump
felt
is
that way.
quite big though, from secondary school to A levels. You
So
don't
what
realize
massive.
it.
So what is it to do with the institution you was studying in?
What, in terms of the distractions or in terms of the quality of the education?
You tell us.
I mean, you tell us. This is your show. You get
To be honest, I think it was the distraction. So
Yeah.
obviously I went to girls' school.
Right.
Secondary school
What
was
school was that?
all female, Prendergast.
What?
And then from there, I went to Christ the King, which
Yeah.
then I came to find guys. And
Right.
Wow.
Not like that,
Yo.
no. But you know, studying with
People did Hot
boys.
Girl Summer before Hot Girl Summer
Wow.
was
You know,
invented.
studying with boys, it adds a different dimension to things.
Right.
So,
Okay.
and then A levels were just difficult. Like GCSE, everything was spectacular, was great, and then A levels things went left. But yeah, so I did 4, and then I did psychology at A level,
Got you. Okay.
and then from there
At
to
A level, you did psychology at A level.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I
And then you
did.
went into do it in university.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
because I've always wanted to be a psychologist
Excellent.
in theory.
So how did that run? Like, so in A levels, so what happened? You got your grades. You went straight to Kent, or what happened?
Ooh. Yeah, so my A levels, as I said, it was a touchy time, so I didn't do that well.
Okay.
So I took a gap year and lived my best life. So I worked and just went and visited all of my friends that was at university. And then after that, I went to Goldsmiths and did a foundation degree.
Okay.
I think the reason for that was because my A levels wasn't great, so I wanted to just go back in education, just to kind of I don't know.
And what was the foundation in?
It was in psychology.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I did a foundation degree in psychology.
Yeah. Okay, so then after your foundation degree,
And then after the foundation, I passed that, and then I went on to the University of Kent to do the actual degree, so a BSc. That was 3 years.
okay.
And
Sorry to cut you. So after formal education, what was the procedure to get to where you are now?
Or how? Actually, sorry.
Go on.
Let's take this
Go on,
slow.
brother.
So how was your university experience? Like, what was? Yeah, I mean,
in what sense? What, in terms of the education or in terms of the social? So I suppose being that Kent is a predominantly white university.
Okay.
There was pockets of black people, but predominantly it was quite a lot of, it was mainly white people, to be honest, as most universities are. But I suppose the social side of things, because I was later in going to uni, I was a student with, 19-year-olds. At that point, I was 20 or 21. So I felt like the older ones. I wasn't really into the partying business because I'd already done that in my gap year. So yeah, it was good. University was a good experience, living away.
So do you think you took university more seriously because you was older?
100%. Yeah, I definitely would say I took it more seriously. I was there to actually come out with a degree, as opposed to do student life, do freshers, do all of that. I did do a bit of it, but it wasn't my focus.
Yeah.
So it was. So yeah, I think I don't regret doing it later, to be honest, because I was more focused in that sense. And socially, it was good. I collected a few friends and.
Friends you still keeping now, or are they all gone?
Friends I still keep. Friends I still keep. I made some valuable friendships there. Let's move on.
Wow.
Okay, cool. So now to my question. From after formal education, how did you get to become what you are now? What was the steps?
After formal education, what did I do? I got a job working at a forensic hospital. So it was a medium secure unit as a social therapist. So what that is how would you describe it? It's like a healthcare assistant. So we would run groups on the ward for the patients. We would tend to their basic needs. So, the basics such as making teas, coffee, things like that, taking them out when they needed to, go to the shop or go on kind of visits, and to kind of reintegrate them into the community.
When you say making teas, were they not physically able, or?
Well, so I suppose I'll give you some background.
Please.
So forensic patients, they are people that have committed a crime.
Okay.
But as a result of their being mentally unwell.
Got you.
Yeah. So they carried out a crime where they was maybe psychotic or, severely depressed or under because of their mental health is the reason why they carried out the crime.
So when you say they committed a crime, were they charged, went to court, and then sent there, or they were just sectioned?
Yep, so they were charged, they went to court, and then it was established that the reason that they committed that crime was because of mentally ill health.
Yeah.
And at that point they get diverted, instead of going to prison, they get diverted to a forensic hospital.
Right.
So in a forensic hospital they are treated, so they're given medication, and they're kind of rehabilitated.
Right, got you.
So so how does that link to making them tea?
So that's interesting. Because they are forensic clients, they aren't allowed to be around sort of sharp objects.
Okay.
So they don't have access to knives, they can't be around boiling water because of the safety element.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
So we would kind of look after them in that way. That was one of the kind of more basic roles, to be honest. But then it also required taking them out for leave, so they wasn't allowed to leave the hospital. It was a locked ward.
Okay.
So if they needed to go out in the community, they needed supervision. And we would, as a social therapist, that's what we would do. So we would escort them out in the community. If they needed to go home, we would escort them from there. So the idea was that, we can't take our eyes off them.
Got you. So after being a social, how long did you do that for?
So I only lasted there for 6 months.
When you say lasted, what happened?
I say that because it was a ward, so it presents its challenges. Being on a locked ward is difficult. You cannot just leave. So if there's less than 3 people, members of staff on the ward, you can't go anywhere. And I felt that was quite difficult because I felt like I was in essence locked up too.
Got you.
On top of that, it was a psychiatric ward, so they needed 24-hour care. So that meant it was like a shift pattern, and being young, having a social life when all your friends are out skanking, living their best, and you're having to do night shift. It wasn't for me. So 6 months was all I could manage.
And what was the next step from there?
And then so after that, I worked at the early intervention in psychosis service, so that was in the community.
Okay.
And that's with young people aged between 18 to 25 that have had their first psychotic episode.
Okay.
So psychosis is, hearing voices, hallucinating. So the service was to help them to integrate back into the community, to get them back working, get them back in education, and it was just to support them while they're in the community.
And you were probably around their age at the same?
Yeah, exactly.
So how was that?
It was, I think it has its challenges because they see you as one of them, and they are. When I say as one of them, as in we were age mates a lot of the time, so having boundaries could be quite difficult, or implementing boundaries could be quite difficult, particularly as I was quite early on in my career. I didn't have that much experience, so that presented massive challenges. Also, that the young people that I was working with were also, majority of them were black, so I felt it has its benefits because we could connect in a kind of a different way. So that role required me often to do home visits, to visit them at home, trying to get them back into university or get them back into education. It might be escorting them to go to interviews. So we'd spend a lot of close contact, like going on buses or just walking up and down. And so other people would interpret us. I remember going on one visit with a client, and one of the tutors thought that I was his girlfriend.
Oh wow.
So the boundaries can become very blurred like that. But it was fun, I can't lie.
Yeah?
It was really fun. So seeing progress was
so
amazing.
what was more, what was more challenging, the can I call it a psych ward? Is that rude to say?
No, it's not rude. It's a psychiatric ward. It is. Yeah.
So it's a psych ward or like, so what did you learn like the most from?
From comparing the two of those, I learned, to be honest, because I was only in the ward for 6 months and I worked at the early intervention service for 3 years. Obviously, I'm going to learn a lot more just due to time, but I suppose big lessons, big take-home points from working in forensic services were that understanding the difference between someone that is mad and then someone that is bad, and that line can become very blurred.
Got you.
Can become really blurred. Someone that is actually experiencing a mental health problem and someone that is just has had difficult upbringing, has had maybe personality issues, and sometimes that's not madness.
Got you.
Do you think people were put in there, just the reason why I asked the case before that it went to trial, do you think like maybe they bust case because the lawyer did well to put them in a psych ward as opposed to going to jail?
That's quite a political question. I think I'm not going to say that doesn't happen. I think it does happen. There is definitely opportunity there, in a sense that if you commit a crime and you can say that you did it under ill health, then you 100% will get diverted to a forensic services where you'll be medicated potentially for a period, and then after 3 years, if you can show that you've been rehabilitated, then you can be discharged. Yeah, you're back out in the community, and that can be, you could commit murder, you can, serious crimes.
Mad.
So I can't, that probably does happen.
So morally, like, did you know their cases?
100%. So the first day that I started, so bear in mind, I literally skipped out of uni, 3 months later got this role, my first job working in this ward. The matron literally sat me down and was like, okay, here's the file, have a read up on the clients, and I literally opened it, and hey, the things that I read, I was like, as in people committed heinous crimes, like very much like heinous crimes, like murdering their children. So to walk in and to read that and to see that was a mad thing.
So how did you manage that, like knowing that you were like sitting in front of like killers, making them tea, not wanting to pour the tea on them?
I mean,
Obviously, you have to be professional, I guess.
Yeah,
that's what it is,
no, exactly that.
how was it for you being in that situation?
I think I'm not going to sit there and say it wasn't challenging. It was massively challenging. I think being able to separate that, you know, I'm there to support them, and despite them doing the crimes that they have, they were unwell at that time, and the aim is to get them well again. So I suppose having that at the forefront, and to be honest, a lot of the time I tried to, you know, after a while you forget about the crime and you just see the person that is in front of you. And that can make it a bit easier.
So so we got to the stage where you're doing the community work.
Yes.
And that was with Psychosis.
Early intervention. Yep, that was the Psychosis service.
Were there things that generally were there patterns of like causing psychosis, or is it just it happens?
No, there was a lot, but quite a few common features. So drug use.
Okay.
I worked in a urban service in Hackney. So around that time, it's probably still the case now. There's high levels of use of skunk.
Okay.
And cannabis, and there have been like direct links that have found that, you know, increased use of cannabis increases your vulnerability to psychosis.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of the clients.
So what's the difference between skunk and just normal cannabis?
So skunk, don't quote me here, but skunk. So the strain that is used with skunk, it is different. So I think is like, you know, a male or two female plants that they breeded together produce a skunk, and it gives a different kind of high.
Right.
Whereas you've got like high grades, which is, you know, high grade, so it's just in its natural form.
Right.
That's not.
That's more natural.
It's more natural, and I suppose with skunk the potency is a lot stronger than high grade. So skunk has a high. So smoking skunk, you're more likely to develop psychosis. Yeah.
Okay.
As
cool.
opposed to high grade, but it's not a fact.
Okay. Cool. So then after that.
Yeah.
What was the next step for you?
So after there, I went to I worked as an assistant psychologist for where did I work? Yeah, I worked as an assistant psychologist at Camden and Islington service. And that was on a research trial looking at the links between cannabis use and psychosis. So the purpose of the trial was to see whether using contingency management, which is in essence kind of giving people a reward, whether giving people a reward for abstaining from cannabis can help to reduce the likelihood of them using and therefore aid their recovery.
Got you.
So what that required was to pay the clients, I think it was, you know, some fee per a week for them to stop using cannabis.
And will you drug test them?
So yeah, I would do the urinalysis each week.
It's a study, isn't it?
Wow.
I know. So, you know, it wasn't without controversy.
But then
it was paying people to stop taking drugs.
Yeah. Stop using cannabis, yeah. So the trial was to see whether that was an effective method.
Surely they would have done that with like cigarettes and stuff like that, like any addiction, right? Or it hasn't been done before?
Well, I don't know whether it has been done before, but I think because of such strong links as that has been found between cannabis use and psychosis, it was you know, if we can find a way to reduce them using it, then let's try paying.
So let's say it worked, then the government would start paying people.
Well, I mean, if it
that
worked,
would be an NHS solution, right?
If it worked, it would propose it would give a possibility that that's something that might then be, you know, taken forward.
Yeah. So it didn't work.
I didn't work on the trial until the end. Okay. But interestingly, I don't think they found a link.
Got you. So
but that's not to say they wasn't effective. I mean, me working on the trial, I did see that when they were, you know, those that were in the contingency management arm that were receiving money, they did abstain.
Got you. How much money did they earn?
How much was it? So they used to get vouchers. So like the first week, I think it was £10. Then the second week, if they abstained, it went up in £10 increments.
Got you.
So that was for like 12 weeks. So
What,
there's-
JD vouchers, yeah?
It wasn't JD, no, it was Tesco vouchers actually.
Okay.
It was, yeah.
And what were the age? What did they range from?
It was early intervention class, so 18 to 25, 18 to 35.
Okay,
18
cool.
to 35.
Oh, and then you did that for how long?
I did that for only like 3 months,
Okay.
because then after that I got on to my first clinical training, which was at UCL to become a low intensity CBT. I don't want to say low intensity, a psychological wellbeing practitioner. So that's delivering low intensity CBT interventions.
So what's that?
What does that mean? Yeah.
Let's break this down.
Let's break that down.
Please.
So what does that mean? So CBT is the type of therapy, cognitive behavioural therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and what that degree, or what that training did is it took a specific number, took some specific interventions that are used in CBT, and trained therapists to deliver those interventions. So it was like 6, I think, core interventions that we learned, and then we would use those interventions with clients presenting with anxiety and depression.
Got you.
So they call it low intensity because it's not so full on. So the sessions would be like half an hour, and you could deliver it over the phone, online, or face to face, and it used a lot of booklets. So it's the idea of guided self-help.
Okay.
So the idea is that the client helps themselves, but guided, so with the support of a therapist.
Got you. So what is cognitive behavioural therapy in general?
So cognitive behavioural therapy is a type of psychological therapy that I suppose is based on the idea that all situations are neutral, but it's how we think about those situations that really impacts how we feel emotionally, physically, and really directs our behaviour. But it focuses mainly on the thoughts and the behaviours.
Just give us an e.g.
Example. So, it's one that I always use in therapy. So someone hears a noise in the middle of the night and then thinks, my house is getting broken into. How is that person going to feel? What emotions?
Fear.
Fear, yeah. Why are you showing your shoulder?
I don't know.
What emotions are you going to feel if someone thinks
Obviously, yeah, fear, anxiety.
Anxiety, exactly. So those are the emotions. And then would they experience any physical symptoms with that anxiety?
Maybe.
Palms might get sweaty.
Palms, exactly.
Might
Sweaty
reach for
palms,
Seize
heart,
up.
heart palpitations. So those are the physical symptoms. And then the behaviour. So having that thought, that what is that person likely to do? So they might, as you said, reach out, get a weapon, run an attack, or they might hide under their bed. So that's the behaviour. So someone else can hear the same noise in the middle of the night and then think, oh, it must be the birds. How is that person going to feel?
Go back to sleep.
Indifferent, so they're not going to have any emotions, but potentially will feel quite calm. Probably no physical symptoms, and then the behaviour will be to go back to sleep. So can you see that the situation is exactly the same, but what's different is the thought that led to 2 completely different outcomes there.
Got you.
In the physical, emotional, and the behavioural response.
Got you.
So that's kind of how CBT understands things.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that clear?
You clear with that? Okay, dope. Thank you for that.
So
That's just one strain of psychology. Not everyone believes in that, so to speak.
Or that
Well,
practice.
it has different models, So that's
Yeah.
one model, one treatment model, which is understanding when people have psychological problems, understanding how you think and changing your thoughts and changing your behaviour can lead to a reduction in distress and the problems.
Does that work for like just particular situations, or could it work for like everything?
Across the board,
Yeah.
to be honest.
As in, someone comes in and they can't sleep because of that example you used, but then they could like panic at other situations. The same thing would work.
Same model,
regardless.
we would use the same model. So I treat people with different anxiety disorders, so OCD, health anxiety, social anxiety, PTSD. There's probably another one, but I can't remember, and depression.
Got you.
And that model is the recommended treatment for all of those problems, and it's still the same thing. How you think in that situation is going to impact how you feel, and then what you do.
The actions.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So back to your career. So you're in a UCL doing the low.
So I was doing the low intensity.
Low intensity.
Yes, that was 9 months. After that, I qualified, and alongside doing that course, you it's like a placement. So you also work in an IAPT service, which is a NHS primary care service that offers CBT, typically as a first-line therapy. So alongside working, so you're at uni for, I think, 2 days a week, and then the other 3 days you're working in the service, treating
So you're
patients.
studying
and working
so
at the same time.
So how did the salaries match up? Because if you're just part-time and studying at the same time, how are you earning money?
Yeah, you get a salary. You're paid to do it.
And you're paid to learn as well. You'd have to
Yeah.
pay
So no, you don't. The course is free.
Okay.
So they pay you a salary. As I said, you work for. They train you for 9 months, and then after that 9 months, you're qualified, and then you tend to work in that service that you trained at, or you can move to a different one.
What qualifications do you need to do what you do?
So what I do now, so I've done another training, which was to a postgraduate diploma to become a cognitive behavioural therapist. But at that stage, what did I need? I think I just needed a degree.
Okay, any degree.
And I think any degree, yeah. To be honest, yeah, any degree, yeah. But also you needed obviously an interest in mental health. Otherwise, why would you have done that? And maybe some experience working within mental health services. But it's not a given. A lot of people on my course came straight from university, finished their degree, and then jumped onto that course.
So would you say that, even your degree and then the first 2 jobs which you had, did that benefit you in where you're at now?
That's an interesting question. So the degree benefited me, I suppose, not necessarily in my first 2 roles, to be honest, because with the degree it's very theory based, and when you're working in practice, often, I mean, you don't need to know the names of the people that did certain theories to work with someone, to support someone. But having that knowledge, is helpful. But I suppose to do the postgraduate diploma that I did, to become a qualified CBT therapist, I think that doing my undergraduate helped, just because I knew some theory already, so I wasn't kind of new to psychology. But it's not a given, to be honest, as I know other CBT therapists that haven't done a BSc in psychology, have done in other things, and then maybe done a conversion course. So it tends to be like a master's.
That kind of links to my other question. So let's say someone wants to get into this, young person, what would be the best way for them to get into the industry, or like a shortcut, or not a shortcut maybe, or the best route, should I say?
See, I suppose it really depends on what type of therapy they want to get into. Okay. So when I started, when I was younger, I wanted to be a psychologist. And
what's the difference?
So a psychologist, so you've got like different types of psychologists. So I suppose a clinical psychologist has trained.
Is that lying down and just all of that stuff?
I don't think there's any therapy now where you lie down. That is a really kind of ancient idea.
That's on TV.
Show pictures and say, what's your association with this?
See, that idea is like psychodynamic psychotherapy.
Right,
But I mean, I work with them, and I've been in their rooms, and they do not have the chaise lounge. There is no lying down. That's
just TV, yeah.
That is just TV.
Okay,
it really
fair.
doesn't look like that.
Okay,
Remember what was the question before?
So I asked you what was the difference between you wanted to be a psychologist?
Yeah, so a psychologist. They have done a doctorate, so 3 years, and they have learned a few different models. So they might have learned a bit about CBT, a bit about systemic therapy, and maybe psychodynamics. So they've got kind of knowledge of a wider range of models, whereas me, I have studied, my qualification is in CBT only. That's the model that I use.
So yours is more of a like refined route, whereas theirs is more broad.
They're broad. So in the I suppose a psychologist in their therapy, they will be drawing on quite a few different models, whereas me, I would only be drawing on kind of CBT.
Got you. Okay, cool. So so back to what we were saying, how does someone navigate?
Yeah, so I suppose, as I said, it depends. I think, that's where we got to. So when I was growing up, I wanted to be a psychologist, but then I got to an age where I realised that I'm not really here to do the 3-year doctorate. It's really long, and it's not specifically my bag. So I researched other ways of working with people with mental health problems outside of that clinical psychology route. And that's where I became aware of kind of other types of therapy, so CBT, psychodynamic, systemic, there's a world of different therapies. So thinking about how you would get into the industry, what I would recommend is finding out, working out, what type of therapy do you actually want to do, because it might be that you don't need to do a doctorate. You might be able to do like a master's and then do a postgraduate diploma, or you can just kind of go through alternative routes. It's not just one direct route,
but university is required.
Yes, so university is required. Doing I suppose doing a degree and doing a master's is required. I say master's or postgraduate diploma is.
So you have to do undergraduate.
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to need to do it, but some people do it undergrad in something else, and then do a master's in a health related field, and then they get through that in that route.
Good.
Okay. So what? So at the moment, at this time, he was doing all public sector, right?
Yeah, so where did we get to? So that's when I trained as a qualified. Yeah, so I did the PW Psychological Wellbeing Practitioner course, the low intensity one. And then once I was qualified in that, I realised that, I can't just sit down and just deliver these 6 interventions. You're a low intensity therapist working in the NHS service, so you're that kind of first level of therapy. So your caseload is really high. They lean a lot on those kind of low intensity workers. And I was like, I'm going to get burnt out very quickly. And the pay was not the pay that I wanted either. So
what was the bracket? Hey. Right, that was the past. It's not too behind it.
You elevated since then.
So when I was training, I was band 4. I'm trying to think of what that was at that time. At that time, it was like 20. I don't want to pull a number out of the sky, but 24 sounds familiar. Starting 24. And then when you're qualified, bear in mind this was 3 years ago, when you're qualified, you then start at band 5, which at that point was 26 starting. So when I qualified, I was like, I was like, yeah, it's happy days, but I was like, this is not the salary where I want to, this is not the salary I want to stay. Yeah, so, and this wasn't the position, this wasn't my end of my career, it was a low intensity work, and I wanted to do...
high intensity.
Yeah, I wanted to do high intensity. I'm seeing people
up there. Is it called that?
Yeah, that is actually called high intensity. If you're in NHS, it's called high intensity, but otherwise it's CBT.
So you found jumping into the private sector was more lucrative, and for you was able to do what you wanted to do in terms of job satisfaction?
Well, I suppose if we come back, so after I did the PWP course, I then needed to train again to become a CBT therapist. So at that point, it was tough. I got onto the course at when did I do it? London South Bank. I literally applied for it like a month before, saw it online, applied for it. I was thinking, let's just see if this bangs, and got the interview. But at that time, I just started a job, and I'd asked them. It was the first week, and I said, can I have this time off? And they practically told me no, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna not go to the interview. So I just badly called in sick.
Wow.
Went to the interview. That was a madness. I was late. I was like an hour late for the interview.
How?
Can you imagine?
Don't do that, kids.
Don't do this, kids. Like literally an hour late. When the day just wasn't working out. I planned to get there early, and everything just wasn't happening. I got lost. It was a madness. And when I got in there, they was like, "Oh, you're here," and they interviewed me. And then I got onto the course. I still gave. I know.
You must have been fire.
Well.
Jeez. For those not watching the video, for those not watching the YouTube video, she's there flicking her hair like she's something.
So yeah, there was that. So then I got onto that course, and I did that for 2 years, but that was part-time. So I practically worked, and that was a weekend course. So I worked 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. No, I worked 4 days a week. And one of those weeks, so to do the course, you have to have a placement where you're actually treating people alongside studying. And
were you still doing your 9 to 5? Was still in?
Was still in the NHS services. Okay. Yeah. So I had to do a placement, and that was a struggle because the job that I worked at wouldn't allow me to do my placement there, even though it would make sense. So
Just being anti.
very anti. Really, it was really anti. So
sorry, this is still in the public sector or private
this is
sector?
this is public sector. This is the NHS services. Yeah,
cool.
they wouldn't allow me to, even though I was offering my services for free, and I knew that the waiting list that they had was high. They still wouldn't allow me to.
Why do you think that's so?
I think in NHS services there's a lot of bureaucracy.
Right.
Because because the course that I was doing, I didn't do it through the NHS. I think maybe they was feeling some kind of way about that. Up until this day, I don't know for sure, so I can only put it down to bureaucracy as to why they didn't allow me to. So I was at work and I was like, if I didn't get a placement for myself, I was going to be kicked off the course.
Got you.
So I literally went on Google, this is while I'm at work, went on Google and typed in CBT CBT services, and the first 5, I just sent an email to all of them, to their kind of email, their
info,
email, their info, and just said, I'm prepared to offer my services for free. Will you allow me to see clients there? You don't have to pay me. And I just threw that out because there was literally like 2 weeks before I needed to get this going, otherwise I was kicked off. And bear in mind, I've already paid like the first term.
That's what I was going to ask you. So this isn't like the other course you did. That
was through the NHS. No, this is me privately.
You found it and
I was paying self-funding.
Wait, so then you being late, they're going to give it to you then?
So back to it. That's what I said. Like, maybe they were just trying to fill numbers.
Like you're paying them. Like,
but at the same time, it's a competitive course,
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, I was dropping P on the
with a briefcase.
But yeah. So I did. Yeah. So I did that. So yeah, that's what we were saying. So I sent out the emails. And then nothing came back initially, but then one of them emailed me back and said, "Oh, come in for an interview." And it was like, when I looked at the service, I was like, "Hey, this is no small service." And I wasn't actually gonna go because I thought, no, like, to be honest, why would they think about like employment, confidence issues and all of this? And went to the interview, and then they offered me the placement like there and then, which was great. So I worked there 1 day a week, and then the other 4 days I was working at the service.
So where was this place? Sorry, where was this place?
This is at Efficacy. It's a private CBT company.
Right. Okay.
While you're studying on the weekends.
While I'm studying on the weekend and working the other 4 days in the NHS.
Dedication.
So some weeks I was working 7 days.
7 days.
7. So the weekend course was Saturday and Sunday.
And how long did you do that for?
2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a grind and a half. So did that, finished the course, but in the meantime, obviously, financially, one has to live. And I obviously needed to pay for the course privately. Yeah. So I realised that, working as a locum, you get more money for doing exactly the same work. So I left the job.
Explain what locum is to you.
A locum is kind of a bank worker, like a contract worker.
Okay.
So you are not sort of, how do you do it? I'm not employed by the service. So they kind of draft you in. You have like a contract. So over there for like 3 or 6 months, and then it just gets extended.
Yes, you're a contractor.
So I was a contractor. Yeah.
And in your field, is there a lot of demand for locum workers?
There is a lot of demand, yeah, because you get paid more for doing exactly the same role, and you get paid hourly.
Nice.
So I realised that, I can do the same thing and get paid more, and obviously I needed to fund the course. So I knew that because I was only also going to be able to work 4 days a week because I was doing a placement for 1 day, I needed to earn more out of less days. Yeah. So that's what I did to fund my degree.
So you did locum full-time locum. You swapped that for your 4 days a week?
4 days a week I worked as a locum, and that's at the university, King's University. And I did that, but then after a year they offered me a permanent position. Nice. And was able to match my pay. So it just made sense. You can get sick pay, you get annual leave, you can play the games. So so I did that, worked there for 2 years until I qualified, and then when I qualified I then left King's and then started to work exclusively at the private CBT.
Efficacy.
Efficacy, where I did my training. So then they promoted me to a senior therapist when I was qualified.
Dope.
And I worked there privately as a contract worker. So I just worked there for 2 days a week and lived my best life, to be honest. And that was great for a bit. And then here we are now. So then also I decided to work part-time at the University of the Arts because I really enjoyed working with students.
Yeah.
So then I worked part-time at the University of the Arts for 3 days a week.
So how does sorry to cut you. So how does it work working in a university? Do what? So students have a breakdown and then they just go to you? Like, how does it?
Yeah, so students will present with, it could be anxiety. So a lot of the student issues tend to be sometimes social anxiety, having to do presentations, students come from all corners of, the world, and sometimes coming into London. So adjusting to London living, adjusting to life in the UK. London is not an easy city, so that can present its challenges. So sometimes they experience social anxiety where they feel that they can't, communicate with other people without feeling anxious. Also, a lot of depression. So they might be they are away from home, experience a lot of homesickness. And that can lead to depression, or even like just stress, like prolonged stress that's untreated and not managed will lead to depression. So those are kind of common student issues, as well as eating disorders. So a lot of students struggle with eating disorders because that idea of not being able to control what's going on around them, so they start to control and restrict their food.
Got you.
And then you get that disordered eating, and it's a whole range, to be honest. You also get like confidence issues. So a lot of the students will come from colleges maybe where they was like on their A game, was like heads, secondary school was top of the class, went to college top of the class, and then you come to uni and then there's someone that's brighter than you and it's a mad thing. It's like, this ain't the plan. Yeah, exactly. So that can cause a lot of anxiety and depression and perfectionism. You get a lot of that at university.
So how does someone get referred to you in university?
Yeah, so what will happen is it might be that it's picked up from their course team. So it might, for example, they maybe aren't attending lectures. It might be that they're constantly handing in work late.
They care, boy. They care.
Yeah, if it's picked up, if it's picked up, then someone will have a conversation with you. Sometimes your tutors, that's what they're there for. That pastoral will have a conversation, find out what's going on, and then maybe will refer you for counselling. Or a lot of the students refer themselves. We're in an age where mental health is being spoken about a lot more, and people will reach out. Yeah. I find that the ones that are less likely to reach out are the black students. They don't tend to reach out until things get real, where you're at risk of failing or you're getting kicked out.
That's like a culture thing?
100%, I think it's a culture thing. A lot of in a lot of African cultures, Caribbean cultures, we're just not taught to kind of access help. So we will sit there and struggle before we will ask someone to kind of support us. And secondly, it's just not in the cultures to actually speak out. We're just not used to kind of telling someone about our problems so easy.
So was this a problem which King's actually saw, and how did they try and combat that?
It's the University of Arts, London.
So I have worked at King's and I've worked at both of them. To be honest, it's university-wide. It's not just these two. It's a problem across all universities.
But did they, based upon just saying that there's specific kind of struggles with specific ethnicity?
Yeah, so they call it like BME, black and minority.
So based upon kind of what you were seeing or the caseloads, was there something where it was highlighted and they acted upon?
So I'm not speaking for any university in particular, but I think most universities, from what I understand, struggle to engage BME students. Okay. I think that's historical. They're less likely to access the service, and services often aren't tailored in a way that can support them, just in the sense that there's more likely to be, typically white middle class therapists
Got you.
working in those services, and less likely to be black therapists. So that is already a barrier where, these students will access support, but they're not necessarily going to see them. And they might not see someone that can potentially understand their problems.
Their cultures.
Cultures and problems. So that creates a barrier in itself.
So then in that regard then, were you seen as more of a commodity, considering that you're less of you?
I mean, that would make sense, wouldn't it? For me, that would make sense.
Right.
But there's always politics.
Okay.
So you wasn't seen as that then? Is that what you're saying?
I think what I have found in my experience is that there is the idea that a lot of services need to engage BME clients, black, minority, ethnic students, but when it comes to actually putting things in place, things often fall short.
Okay. What kind of things could they put in place?
So there's quite a few things that can put in place. I suppose what knowledge of myself as well. To speak to someone as a black woman, to speak to someone about my problems is no easy feat. And therefore, being in a position where that is accessible to me. So trying to ensure that I see someone, or can have the possibility of seeing someone that looks like myself, will be helpful as a start. On top of that, knowing that in university services is short-term therapy, so they only offer up to 6 sessions, sometimes 4.
Okay.
And if someone already has kind of trust issues and struggles to open up,
it
might be like session 3 when they just start talking. If you've only got 4 sessions, then that's the therapy done.
So then in kind of like forgetting kind of the actual practice of what you're doing, within you being employed in your career at the moment, did you notice a pattern whereby I think you mentioned that obviously there's not as many BME therapists.
Yeah.
So was you pro-discriminated against, as in maybe elevated to levels where because you're black, you're given a more beneficial chance of getting jobs? Or was
quite the opposite.
Really?
To be honest, quite the opposite. I think, typically universities are, institutions that have been dominated by white people, and therefore, I suppose how does one put this?
Drop the thing, man.
How does one put this? It's the same struggles. Typically being a black person, it's harder to get jobs. That's just across the board.
Okay.
So if you can imagine being in trying to get a job in an institution that is already dominated heavily by white middle class people, that is a hurdle in itself. One thing that I noticed, and I've consistently noticed, is that as a black woman, to connect with, as an employee, to be able to connect with a team of maybe white middle class people requires me to maybe act differently.
Okay.
I maybe have to talk about my personal life in a little bit more depth than I would like to, just to be able to connect with some people.
Really?
Yeah. And as a result of that proves challenging.
So was that a learning curve for you, actually stepping into those roles to start learning how to deal with the different types of, I guess, office culture? Office culture,
office environments, massively. It was a big shift.
So how did you deal with that, learning a different skill set?
How did I deal with that? That's a really good question, because I think being okay with myself, I think, was the first part, because being okay with being different, and accepting that, and thinking it's okay to actually put myself as Sherene out there to people, and that is acceptable, was the first part, because I typically felt that I needed to fit in with, the cultures that were there. When I said that, talking about working with middle class people, I wouldn't see myself as middle class. So when I'm hearing the conversations of, the cleaner that came on the weekend and she didn't do this and she didn't do that, I'm like, hey, cleaner, I'm that one at home, that is me. Or hearing, oh yeah, I went to like the south of France for the weekend, and you're hearing things, and it's like, oh, what did you do on the weekend? Oh,
I went raving.
I just
went to lick my bedroom.
I just went Bromley, you know.
Bouncing Catford still.
Chilled,
I'm
like,
market.
exactly. So there was a lot of that. Like I'm not like my life is very different, and that proved really difficult. But being okay with that, I think, was the first step, and then also realizing, you know, you can connect with people on different levels.
Definitely.
It was a big way of dealing with that.
Being a cognitive behavioural therapist, I want to pronounce it correctly. So what kind of like skills would you say you need, or like values do you need to have or hold?
So in terms of the skills, I think because with CBT is a very problem-focused type of therapy, people come to you with problems, as in, okay, I'm struggling to sleep, or I feel anxious when I'm socializing, or I can't get to work on time because I cannot get out of bed. Like, it's quite problem focused. So I think one of the skills of being a CBT therapist is helping people to identify what those problems are, and to think about, okay, what is it that they need? And also identifying the problem and think about what is actually maintaining the problem. What behaviours are they doing that is keeping this problem going? Because often people have, you know, anxiety issues and low mood, and the methods that they're using to cope, they often don't realise that these methods are actually keeping the problem going or making it worse. There's an element of kind of, I think for me, I'm a fixer. I like to fix problems. Like, there's just not even in mental health, just in life. Like, I like to fix issues. So have CBT kind of really fits in line with that. Because people have problems, and I need to kind of try and think about what they need to do to fix those problems. And also being a good listener, because obviously you spend a lot of time sitting and listening to people, listening to people's problems, and being able to hear someone's difficulties, to be able to empathise, but then also when they leave the room to be able to kind of leave that there and not take those problems home.
Okay. So you're 7 years in. So what's your biggest regret so far, your career?
That's very. I think my biggest regret is probably not putting myself out there. So I experience social anxiety. So when I'm in kind of group situations, like, it's a bit sticky. I feel very anxious, and I often don't talk a lot of the time. So when you work in mental health, sometimes you have to be in like team meetings, and often, like, the most annoying thing is, like, someone will say something and will ask a question, and you'll know the answer. Like, you'll actually know what the person needs, and because you're anxious, you'll just sit there and be like, oh no, I'm not going to say it because people think I'm an idiot, or people aren't going to take me seriously. And as a result, I think that kind of hampered my career, because, you know, in order to progress, at times you need to be seen, and people need to know what maybe you're thinking, and to be able to present ideas. And if you're just sitting there keeping those ideas to yourself, and people don't hear them. And I suppose also, because of that kind of social anxiety, not going for jobs where I have to do a presentation. If I see in the lineup that in the interview I have to do a presentation, I will sidestep that. I'm not even applying, like, at all. So I'd say some of those regrets is not managing that element of my anxiety earlier. So
you still live with that anxiety now?
I still get anxious in social situations, but I feel a bit more able to just say, do you know what, just say it. What's the worst that can happen? If people think you're an idiot, they think you're an idiot, but at least you've said...
I'm an idiot.
At least you said it, but you might be an idiot after, but at least it's out there.
So...
Imagine.
You're cheeky, fam. You're rude, fam. You're rude. But, okay, so one of the things that I used to always consider, bro, you're a bad man, you know.
Bad mind.
One of the things that I always used to think about is therapists. If you're a therapist, you shouldn't need therapy.
That's really interesting.
Yes, well, I was young and naive at the time, but so obviously you saying you have your social anxiety. Does that hamper your ability to do your job, or?
Not necessarily. It's interesting. Not necessarily. I think it has its nuances in the sense that I treat people with social anxiety.
Yeah.
So I treat people with exactly the same problems as ones that I have and have had. So I think it can be helpful because I can literally empathize on a level of I've been there, and I can guess as to how that feels. So I think it can be helpful. I suppose to some extent it can be problematic in the essence that sometimes you can feel like a force because you're there telling someone, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that, this is what's going to help you, let's think about doing this and that, knowing full well that I might not be in a position to do that myself. And I suppose, everyone has off days. Sometimes I'm just not on it.
That's natural.
I'm just not on it.
And do you use the skills that you've obtained to, I won't say like fix yourself, but manage your you do, or have you considered going to speak, not maybe your colleague but someone that does your cognitive behavioural therapy for yourself?
For my own? So I mean, I use the same techniques that I do in therapy. I use them myself 100%.
Does it work when you do it to yourself, or do you need someone to do it for you, if that makes sense?
I think it depends. I would say, I'd say with my social anxiety, as it has been worse and it has been more severe, and now probably in a good stage, it doesn't affect me that much. But I suppose when it was probably in more severe stages, I probably would have needed someone to, help me through a little bit.
Got you.
But I didn't, for probably similar reasons of, therapy isn't for black people, black people.
So what would you do differently then?
In what sense?
In your career, like if you could, roll back time, like what would you do differently? Would you I don't know, like for example, would you think, oh wow, I would you realise that you have social anxiety sooner and try and treat that, and then but because from what I'm hearing, maybe you didn't self-diagnose early enough?
100%. Yeah. I don't think I did, to be honest, because I used to just find my way through things. Like I worked in roles where, I suppose, when I was working in the early intervention service, when I was working as like a low intensity, unqualified worker, you can get away with not saying anything because arguably there's someone more senior than you. So you can take a back seat. So that meant it kind of helped me to just do more avoiding. I didn't really have to deal with the issue because I could still do my job and it wasn't really picked up. It didn't affect me it didn't really affect my work like that. But I suppose in terms of like career progression, I definitely would have kind of recognised, Sherene, you're sidestepping jobs because of this. Like, let's come and deal with this thing. But so I probably would have dealt with that a lot earlier, to be honest.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
cool.
What would you say is like your future plans in this industry, in your career? What's the goals going forward?
I'd say future plans are I'd like to start working with children. So I've always kind of wanted to work with children. So I suppose what I've found is that in the adults that I work with and treat at the moment, you can identify that a lot of the problems was evident in their childhood experiences. So I always think, if you had CBT a lot earlier, we might not have been here, or we might be in a different space. So I want to work with children next, and also I also have an interest in property, so I'd like to blend the two. So to be able to kind of offer housing and therapy for people with common mental health problems.
So how would that work?
Dope.
As in you check in a bit like is it Maudsley?
Well, I suppose they're out there already, but it wouldn't be like a hospital. I suppose it'd be more like residential accommodation, so that's supported housing.
Right, okay.
But maybe having some CBT therapists
who pops in
in-house and kind of runs the group. And they are out there, but I suppose the focus is more on that kind of a inpatient sort of ward-like setting, but more like,
We need to be like more relaxed.
More relaxed, yeah. So to be able to offer nice, livable upmarket accommodation, but also have that element of therapy and like a nice therapeutic space.
Sounds like a not rehab, but like a retreat kind of.
Something like this, yeah. This is what I'm thinking, like a retreat, but with a bit more of a focus on like more therapy as opposed to kind of wellness.
Got you.
Because that whole wellness agenda, I think, is a bit played out at the moment. But
Got you.
yeah, let's do therapy.
Okay, fair enough. You sound like you've been busy for quite a minute. So then, in terms of like, obviously your other goals outside of your workplace.
Okay, what kinds of goals?
Like, obviously everyone has life goals, which aren't necessarily just based on their career. Do you think like I don't know, what other things are you into? Do you think maybe your work schedule has impacted on that, or whatever it is?
So I'm wondering whether you're talking about sort of as in like what relationships or that, you know, that is that where you're shooting?
I mean, like obviously, like, you know, without saying that, obviously.
Exactly.
No, like as human beings, innit? Like everyone has goals to either get married, start families. I don't know, maybe give themselves to Christ, Allah, or work in some different.
Quite specific goals that you're coming.
But other people have goals outside of work. So
yeah,
I'm saying,
I hear that.
it sounds like you've been quite busy for quite a while.
Yes.
Has it impacted your?
How was that impacting? What goals were they? Like, do you want to get married? Do you want to start a family, etc.? Do you think that your work schedule has impacted on that?
Okay, yeah, I think massively, to be honest. I've always been career driven, and you know, my goal has always been to be able to kind of get a salary that I can live on as just a foundation, and I've always been driven by that, not necessarily by money, but having a salary where I can support myself.
Safety net type of thing.
Like a safety net, exactly that. And in the search for that, I have neglected the other areas, such as maybe, you know, romance, you know, collecting a husband, and potentially having children. So yeah, I'd say those areas have, that specific part has been neglected. But then at the same time, I think my goal to have a salary has been based on the fact of when that time comes, I won't have to worry about money. So that really was my goal and aim. So I was kind of working on that, but from a different angle. I'm not coming to be poor. So
Amen.
so let's secure the finance and make sure I can finance myself, and then we go and collect a husband.
So what do you think, like, the bag may put off potential suitors? So I know we're digressing a little bit. It's not necessarily part of your career, but I'm just going by.
That's so interesting. I think quite possibly. Maybe, you know, let's think about it. You know, to be honest, I think, you know, so that gender roles and, you know, the way that the society is set up at the moment, you know, the idea that, you know, men should be maybe the higher earners and women less so. So I think, as you said, securing the bag puts me in a position where I may, or more likely, potentially, maybe this is an assumption, I'm more inclined to be a higher earner. And therefore, it may be that the man that I find is earning less than me, and that can put off some men. You know, some men do easily get de-emasculated by things like that. So, yeah, I think it can potentially be a problem.
Can you use your CBT therapy for that?
I wish I could fix the problem.
But that doesn't put you off, like.
Well, what can I do? I don't think, what can I cover? I can't really do anything about that now unless I go on like sugardaddies.com or something.
Wow.
Like,
I hope people are skipping.
I hear this. I hear there's a lot going on sugardaddies.com, but I suppose it's about what you value, isn't it? Like, I know me, in particular, the whole finance thing, I wouldn't have a problem being with someone that is earning less than me. That's not really an issue, but I suppose it's about finding a guy that is okay potentially being with a woman that is earning more than him.
Good. Well, boy. Well, thank you for sitting with us, Sherene. If people want to get in contact with you or your services or like websites that they could, do you want to share? Or?
Yeah, so I suppose Privately, I work, as I said, for Efficacy, and they can be found. I don't know the URL, but if you were to type in CBT and Efficacy, I think they're the top one that comes up.
Okay.
And they offer CBT for common mental health problems. Obviously, it's a private service, so it's paid for. I mean, I'm trying to think. I suppose it's important to think about if you're struggling with your mental health and feel that you need therapy, that you can access that through the NHS services, your local IAPT service, offer CBT for free and other psychological.
What's
therapy.
that IAPT?
IAPT, improving access to psychological therapy.
Okay.
So if you was to type that in or ask your GP, they'd be able to refer you.
Okay.
But yeah, and you can find me on LinkedIn if you wanted to ask me any questions about how one becomes a CBT therapist. I'm open to answering them.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Oh, we're going to publicise that anyway.
We don't. That's a private space. Let's stick with LinkedIn.
So what's your account on LinkedIn? Just
I think, I don't know, it works. My name, so
Yeah.
Sherene Olusesi. I think you type that in and you'll find me.
excellent. Well,
Cool,
thank you,
cool.
Sherene. That's the Ends to Excellence podcast. Thank you for listening. Boom.
Oh.